Children are like adults. They have role models. They have people that they look up to. Jackie Robinson and Roy Campanella. When they were coming in the late 40s, I and all of my buddies, we wanted to be like them. And if you don't know of anyone who's in business, then that's not something that the youngsters are going to aspire to.
I think entrepreneurialism is really the key that drives America. My father was the epitome of being able to recognize an opportunity, find the resources to take advantage of that opportunity and add value in that equation. As he would like to say, if you really want to control your own destiny, entrepreneurship is the ultimate way to do that.
He wasn't a guy who just dad loaned him a few $1 million to get started. He's an entrepreneur's entrepreneur. So anybody who wanted to have their own, he was that guy who gave us hope that it can be done. And it carries us a long way. It carries me. The importance of a film like this is to expose folks who look like me to a guy named Herman Russell that they may not know of, but created something from nothing to something great. Atlanta without an East J, I don't know what that looks like. I don't think I want to know what that looks like.
Herman and I were born within a month of each other and within 3 miles of each other. I was born on the north side of town. He was born on the south side of town. But the two worlds could not have been more different. Everything in the world I was born into was designed to make sure I succeeded. Everything in the world he was born into was designed to be sure he did not succeed. And Herman, in his lifetime, overcame all of that.
He was poor. I remember him saying that when he was growing up, they couldn't afford to buy cow's milk. They would buy evaporated milk and water it down.
I know the condition my parents was in. I know we were so poor that I didn't have a decent pair of shoes to wear. I remember when it rained, my shoe would get filled up with water.
He was born at a time when the state law was segregation. The customs in business, customs socially, were all designed to put him down. And in addition to that, Herman was born with a speech defect, and he was dyslexic.
His family grew up with not much, but they had family. Summerhill was a great community. The people knew each other and people respected each other.
A community in my heart is a place that you live, place that you fellowship in, an area that you share, you give love to one another. You are concerned about your neighbor kid. It's a place where people have dialogue.
His mother taught him compassion and was a woman of great faith and very committed to the church and would work every day. She was a laundress and she would go and wash people's clothes and then walk home and, take care of the family and cook the meals and do all the things that she would do as a wife.
He had school teachers who were highly skilled people. They were segregated schools. The most qualified job you could get was a school teacher's job. And they taught personal pride. And they taught that we were bigger than our circumstances.
He was very entrepreneurial, ambitious at his early age. There was an inner will, and he says, I can do this. I can control my destiny.
There was something different about him that was more powerful and more positive. That's what I think. I think it was the training and the love. He was surrounded by love, and you can do this.
As a young boy, he saw that his community didn't have a shoe shine stand, and he recognized that that was a need that was in the area, and he saw an opportunity also to retail, sell candy, sell shoelaces, and just provide a need to the community.
His father told him, well, Herman, you know, you got to have a permit. It was a little vacant lot or whatever. And he was going to build this little shed to shine the shoes. And he got one of his brothers to walk with him down there. So the brother walked with him all the way till they got to the courthouse. But then when it time to go in, the brother wouldn't go in. But Herman determined he went on in by himself. Can you visualize the little black boy standing in line, and then finally, and look how cruel people are, and finally they said, boy, what you want, boy?
He's nervous and he's stammering, but he eventually gets out the point that he wants to start a shoe shine stand in his Summer Hill neighborhood. And the alderman just kind of looked at him and laughed and said, little nigger, you don't need to start a shoe shine business, or you need to just go home. And the others in the crowd laughed at him. He and his brother take the many-mile trip back home after that council hearing, and he knew that that was a turning point for him because he was going to do the shoe shine stand anyway.
He put up his shoe shine stand and his Coca-Cola box. And actually, he made enough money as a 14, 15-year-old to buy a lot across the street from his house for $150, he said. And in his spare time, because his father was a contractor, he got leftover stuff from his father's contracting business, and he built a house on it. And he used that house to rent, to pay his way to Tuskegee to college, to get a degree as a contractor. And so he's an amazing sort of fellow to take a stuttering handicap and turn it into a college degree.
Believe it or not, I was one of the best shoe shiners that you have ever seen.
Back in the 40s, there were only two high schools in Atlanta for African Americans. One was Booker T. Washington High, and the other one was David T. Howard High.
The first high school was Booker T. Washington on the west side, where all black people went, including Martin Luther King Jr.
The second high school for blacks in Atlanta is called David T. Howard. Washington High, we went one semester, and then we went on, came back and finished Howard. We got a football team.
I was in the 8th grade when I met Herman. He played football. Herman was an end, and I would go back and watch him play and practice.
He has a trophy where it says most valuable player. And he said it was a city-wide award that he won as the most valuable black player in the city's school system. Sometimes he would embellish a little bit about his athletic prowess, but I'm assuming all of that was fact.
Well, he did what he was supposed to do. He was an end, so he called passes at the end. He was good, but he wasn't outstanding.
Herman was the campaign manager for Ralph Smith, who ran for the presidency of the student body. And Herman, as the campaign manager for his candidates, had to introduce him. And so I instantly had great admiration for him to have no issues with speaking given his speech impediment. And I've never forgotten that. And he had it all of his life. It never stopped him from being an advocate. It never stopped him from expressing himself. And it said something about his confidence in what he needed to say. It was just terrific.
There was such a close relationship between him and his father. He worked all through high school, working with his dad.
I have to give a lot of credit to my father because he believed in real estate, owning your own home, a piece of land, he said, probably never wash away.
His father did not have a formal education, but had more sense than anyone he knew. His father had an unbelievable influence on his work ethic. He always described him as being a master plasterer, meaning that he was one of the best in the city at what he did and would be hired by many all over the city.
His father did the Fox Theater, places like that, and historical homes.
My grandfather overcame a lot of obstacles, because you think about it, he was doing this work in the 20s. I mean, they were lynching black people then. He had to be very subservient.
My father I never heard a white person call him Mr. Russell. Always would borrow a preacher. I was determined to improve their life and my life. And in many times I said, hell with segregation. I'm gonna be what I want to be.
He became a master plasterer at the age of 14 years old. And when he went to Tuskegee, he continued to do work in Tuskegee. And his brother, Rogers Russell Jr., and others would come up to do projects until the sheriff in Tuskegee, told the boys they needed to get back to Atlanta and stop getting this business from the local boys, because at some point they were doing enough business that they hit the radar. The word got around that this young black fella was doing business in Tuskegee, and he eventually had, he got the message from the sheriff that I want your crew out of town by sundown.
Herman graduated, came back, and was plastering with his father the next day. I would see him sometimes at the end of the day. He didn't have on a shirt and tie like most of us. He had on plastering clothes, and he was all spotted up and sweaty and everything. But that was his job, and he understood it. Now, when you saw him at a party on Friday night, he was all sharp and all dressed up. But Herman, unlike a lot of people, understood his work and what he had to do. And if plastering meant wearing overalls every day, he did that.
He was a hard worker, just work. I just thought he was a fine young man, and I said, whoever gonna get him, gonna get somebody. I saw Herman, and I said, now, wait a minute now. He was in love with another girl named Evelyn Wise, so the family loved Evelyn Wise. I said, well, that won't last long, because he got to marry a girl from my hometown. He got to meet Otia.
Both my husband and Herman were native Atlantans, which you don't find around too much these days. Otia had come from a farming community. Union Point is about halfway between here and Augusta. Otia was a very thoughtful person, very giving person, but very tough. I mean, she would stand her ground. That was with Herman and with others.
She was quite a character, but a lovely character. She was probably the only one that challenged my dad. Like if he said, "You're gonna have to go get the cows," she'd say something back to him, "I'm too old to go down in the pasture. I should be dating now."
Finally got him and Tia to meet over to our house. And I want you to know in no time, even Wild wasn't even in the picture. Because that country girl had thrown his head and he couldn't help from getting close to her. She was a beautiful girl, built up and pretty with long hair. And they got in love and they had a family.
Otia was the glue that held that family together. See, because Herman just did his business and whatever, but when he came home, he was not the king of the roost. He ran his business, but she ran the household.
It was very clear when he stepped across that doorstep that there was a new boss in the house, and it was Otelia Hackney Russell. I would rather, honestly, my father deal with me on issues than my mother, because she did not play.
Initially, Herman worked. I mean, he physically worked with his hands in terms of doing jobs. At the end of the day, she sort of pulled things together to make sure that the deals that he had made, the promises he had made, and the money he had collected and so on, that they were adequately cared for and put in the right place. She would suggest things to him, and in many instances just simply tell him that this is what, needs to happen here. And she always had his dinner warm when he came home from those plastering jobs and so on. She was there to make sure that he had a decent meal. She was a very strong person and an excellent helpmate, I would say.
I remember hearing Herman say how fortunate he was to have a marriage that was as wonderful as he and Otia. Determination, persistence, durability, faith, love, caring, consideration. That's how their love was. It was broad and endless.
It was the 1943 gubernatorial campaign, the primary. And I'm sitting with my father at 8 years old, listening to WSB radio, and Eugene Talmadge comes on. And he says, "This is your governor, Eugene Talmadge. I am running for re-election. I have 2 planks in my platform, niggers and roads. I'm against the first and for the second."
Herman Russell's involvement in the civil rights movement is very significant, though very quiet.
We focus on the charismatic leaders, direct action demonstrations. But when you think about the organizational structure of the civil rights movement, who's actually paying for the legal fees? Who's paying for the legal representation? Who's bailing the students out? Who's paying for the offices and the rental space?
He was a part of the strategic planning with Martin Luther King and his lieutenants. He and Martin Luther King had a pact that Herman would continue to grow his business and have economic success, and he would play a role in helping to make the civil rights movement continue by making sure that the leaders could get bailed out of jail.
Herman, from the very beginning, was always there as a resource. When Martin wanted to relax, he went to Herman's, swam, ate good food, and Herman Russell provided that sanctuary for him.
The uplifting and the improvement in the quality of life of black people in Atlanta or any place else is inextricably intertwined with the economy there.
In the struggle to create an open society for all of God's children, he was an economic generator, that he produced jobs. And that is just so very meaningful. Herman started expanding his plastering operation into commercial plastering operation from residential, and then also fireproofing, when fireproofing became an important issue for fire marshals and for governmental regulations. He made his first million in Jim Crow period.
What Herman brought to his business was excellence, satisfaction, understanding the customer needs. And he met the needs, and the needs were more important than whether Herman was black or white. He was smart, he was strategic, he understood that there is no substitute for excellence. And even the meanest segregationist wants his elevator to work.
As a young person, it would be difficult for someone to understand that anybody couldn't walk into any town, any county in the state of Georgia and put your greenback dollar down and buy what you'd like to buy. The discrimination that took place, it had to hurt Herman a lot, but being Herman, he found a solution.
The chapter in the book, that's one of my favorite chapters, is my brother from another mother, or that's what Mr. Coughlin would say. We grew up with Mr. Coughlin. We knew him as the real estate guy. We knew that he and my father were close. His wife, Georgia, and my mother were close. They would come over our house. At that time, HUD was expanding their program on affordable housing.
Herman told Jim, he said, I need to buy property for HUD projects. And he proposed that they go in together, and Jim would go out and find the land, and he would just tell people, he was honest. He said, I am representing a client in Atlanta who's interested in buying this property. What we did say and could say, that Herman was black. And if they didn't ask anything, he didn't say anything.
Mr. Coughlin, before he passed, told me a story. They were in Americus, Georgia. He said they found out that he was representing a black man. He said he had to get out of there. He said they were coming to get him. So he said he had a couple of those.
We did. We got out of there quickly and safely. Herman appreciated that Jim, he was kind of at risk.
Frankly, a lot of those of us who have enjoyed a certain degree of success, we've all had to do things like that in one form or other. Some years ago, I had a friend who was a law professor, and I had him front a couple of deals for me that I was not able to do without having a white face there in charge of it. If that's what it took to get the job done, then you do that.
They'd never met a black man that had that type of money that could come in and make that type of investment.
Herman Russell had a way where there was no animosity. It was nothing but love in that man. Good book says, treat people how you want to be treated. And if we all lived that way, we'd all be better off.
The one thing that I've learned since I was a kid is that anger is not a helpful emotion. You can't think clearly. You can't think thoughtfully. You can't think in a planned way if you are clouded with anger.
You can't let things that go wrong distract you from your goal. And Herman was a master at that. And so he played a very, very important role.
Atlanta Action Forum was a group of black and white business leaders in the city. And the ground rules were you closed the door and you talked about what was on your mind. You There was no PC. You just said it, whatever it was you were concerned about. Herman was a key member of that.
Every once a month, we would have a dialogue for about 2 or 3 hours and talk about how we can improve the quality of life for people in this great city.
The idea was to put in place a group of relationships that can be called upon when needed to deal with issues, and indeed, we did just that. We got to know each other very, very well, and out of that grew some real lasting friendships. Very often, the whole thing that's a bar to friendship is ignorance.
It still remained that they live in one side of town and the blacks live in another, but they would make things work because they could agree on things and get together. There was no riots, outright burnings and looting and all that, and nothing like that ever happened in Atlanta.
He was able to garner the respect of the community, the black community, the white community, the Asian community, the Hispanic community.
We had a very divided society. In many ways, we still do. But Herman would throw parties back then, way before he and I ever met, and he would have blacks and whites there. He just really loved people, and it didn't matter to him what their background was, what their color was.
All race got some prejudice, you know, and you draw out of it, and that's good. That's good. We all got to find ways to work together.
I ask the Lord that every night before I go to bed, Lord, able me to have a clean heart, clear my mind, and clear my heart. The Lord don't say that lack no person. He said love one another. He had been taught to love the Lord, and with a clean heart, you can forgive people.
Atlanta was a special place, even when Herman Russell was born. The people who lived in Atlanta right after the Civil War made a determination that Atlanta was going to rise out of the ashes. Who does that?
All the other southern cities were old, traditional, been there forever cities, and Atlanta was a hustler's town.
There was a sense from its early years that Atlanta was going to be a place that was different from much of the South in terms of commerce and business. Yes, we're a town in segregated South, but we can be different. This is our home. We're going to make it work.
In 1962, we elected Ivan Allen Jr., who understood it from a business point, and he understood it from an equality point, and he made the difference. He came to Washington to testify for the Civil Rights Act, and he was a real agent of change. That is one of the untold stories of the Civil Rights Movement. The role white people, conservatives, some, moderates, and liberals, played in inching the movement along.
Some of us thought he was taking a big risk, that he would kill his political career. It turned out, because he took that position, what we were worried about, that would be the other way around. It was sure that that was the right thing for him to do, and he ended up being one of my heroes.
When the moment came when the mayor of Atlanta became an African American for the first time, that was a seismic event in Atlanta. The Coca-Cola Company was the company that stepped up and created the Atlanta Covenant, it used to be called, where, okay, the economic power in the city is still in the hands of whites. And the political power is now in the hands of African Americans. And the thing to do is to build a partnership to make that work.
Maynard Jackson insisted that 25% of each contract that the government let be done by a minority or person of an opposite race. There was also an ordinance that said that if a black company got a contract with the city, it had to have a partner that was 25% white.
For some Atlantans, he was moving too fast. But you had individuals who believed in building downtown Atlanta, having Atlanta remain as this commercial epicenter, and they wanted to create change. These individuals, like John Portman, worked with black contractors like H.G. Russell. And they said, we can build this city, and we can share the wealth, and we could all win.
There was a thirst among a lot of whites for a means by which they could move this nut forward. And Herman, early on, provided that opportunity. So did Jesse Hill.
That partnership between Mr. Russell and Mr. Hill really came to the forefront because they would be able to build and help folks, and he was able in some instances to finance or insure them. They worked in tandem because of their personal relationship and because of their joint desire to see the black business community thrive and grow and become a central part of the economy of Atlanta.
The reason why Atlanta Life existed was because blacks were not able to get insurance. And so Mr. Herndon had the vision to form this company and became one of the largest in the country.
They became friends. They talked every day about business, civic, community, etc. They literally carried on that way for 30 plus years. They became business partners in concessions. They supported each other. They were leaders. They brought other people into the network. It was unique to Atlanta, and then they took it nationally.
They were very close, like brothers. Hill almost daily went to Herman's office.
Atlanta was growing. You were going to have the airport expanded, and the budget was going to be at least $500 million. That was a lot of money back in the 1970s.
Mr. Russell's company was sitting right there at the position to take advantage of all that. And if it hadn't been for his company doing that, other companies, in my opinion, would not have had the opportunity.
Our company had the general contract to build Colony Square, which was much bigger than anything we had ever built before. So we were kind of gulping at what we had to do. And when our bids came in from drywall contractors, the low bid which was a huge subcontract on this huge project, was from the H.C. Russell Company. I had heard of them. I was aware that it was a minority company. And I felt like we were in so deep, I was looking for companies that were bigger than we were to help us as subcontractors, and his was not one of them. But we checked him out, and everything came back good in terms of their performance. So we gave him the job and got started, and I was worried originally about having him keep up with us. What I quickly found out was that our problem with Herman Russell was staying out of his way. It was just marvelous to see how he did it and how strong he was as a hands-on manager. It was later when Delta put us together as general contractor joint venture partners that we really got together. We became personal friends, and after a while, our friendship was much more part of the whole relationship than our business was.
My father would take time. Whenever he would meet somebody, it was a genuine relationship.
People tell me that he could walk in a room and he just had so much charisma. I mean, he was like breaking barriers.
Mr. Russell was critical for Atlanta at the time that we needed that. He was changing minds, impacting lives, and really helping to create the foundation of this Atlanta that's too busy to hate.
He has a warm smile. He looks right at you when he talks. The South was changing, but it was still very difficult.
Herman taught me a lot about what life was really like, because I grew up in a household with a father that had grown up in South Georgia and was a segregationist and all of that. And I just didn't have any experience with anybody like Herman.
The fact that he was able then to go from being a joint venture partner to being the prime contractor for businesses also helped others, because you were diversifying the black economy in the sense that people could get into various types of businesses.
Think of it, he's been on the lowest rung you can think of being a shoe shine guy to, being on some of the most powerful boards in town.
What Herman was so unique in was how he was okay no matter what the circumstances were. Herman was a success in business before affirmative action became the way business was done in Atlanta and in the rest of the country. He would have been a success in any kind of environment just because he wouldn't not be a success.
When I go out to look for an individual to bring on board, I always look for someone 10 times sharper than I am.
Herman was an activator, a motivator, an educator. He was famous for unlocking the unusual potential in people. I am a living example of a graduate from the Herman Russell University.
There are a number of individuals in this city and around the country who can be considered a part of the H.J. Russell University. Because a number of people worked there, or got their start there, or watched him, started there and left, went and did their own, in purpose to try to model themselves after what he did.
I was a little black boy from the Bronx. I didn't have anybody in my family that was an entrepreneur. And the idea that somebody believed me enough to give me a 20% interest in a company was amazing. It changed my life.
Mr. Russell gave me the freedom, the carte blanche to just get done what I need to get done. And I did. I went out, I brought the first computer into H.J. Russell. And it was lots of fun.
He had a great saying was, squeeze all that juice out that orange, Dave. He shared a lot with me. He always took time for me. He didn't want you to ask for help. He wanted to see you put the work in, put the effort in, and then he would help you in a heartbeat.
If he came into the room and spoke with you, he'd speak with you as if you were the only one in the room.
H.J. was very kind, but he also had an ability to exercise tough love, which it's something that I'm not as good at.
Herman had a guy who worked for him who was very good, but when he got paid on Friday, he wouldn't go straight home. He would go hang out and drink and be merry. So on Friday, instead of paying him, Herman would take the paycheck and give it to his wife. Personally.
I was working for either Andy or Maynard, and I got a call in my office. And there had been a problem related to the water system around one of the Russell properties. And I told him I'd get back to him. He said, now Shirley, understand that when you commit to me that you're gonna get back to me, I'm counting on that. I don't wanna have to come down there and see you in person. He really mentored me, kind of on-the-job training on how to work with corporate leadership in Atlanta. And that served me very well 15 or 20 years later when I was mayor of Atlanta.
not well off in my childhood. And so I have very simple tastes. And I bought a car for $250, the 1967 Dodge Dart. The driver's door wouldn't work. So I always came in on the passenger side. There was no air conditioning. We walked outside and he looked at the car and he said, "That's your car?" And he walked over, looked at it, and he looked at me and he said, "Boy, I think you and I are gonna get on just fine."
After college, I bought a pickup truck for about $125. We used to go to party and cocktail party in that old pickup truck. And I used to have to park a couple blocks away from the house that we was gonna go to for the party. And that was very embarrassing to my wife to get out of this old ragged pickup truck in her cocktail dress.
We would say that Herman would hold on to the dollar till the eagle would grin. He'd hold it so tight.
We were sitting in a board meeting one day, and we were talking about something. He said, somehow we said we bet something, you know. So he pulled $100 out and threw it on the table. That's one of the few times in my life I had a $100 bill in my pocket. So I took mine, I said, "You ain't the only one got a $100 bill now." Well, he went to his other pocket, and he pulled out a wad. I said, "Okay, Mr. Russell, you win. I ain't got that pocket."
Herman was never broke. He always had some money he had earned, and so he earned every single break that he got. It was because of his lifestyle.
Live lightly, but work hard. That's what Herman did for me. He always lived below his means, but he worked extremely hard, and he didn't take excuses. We went to an event in South Atlanta, and he saw a penny on the floor. And he went and bent over, picked up the penny, looked at me, and said, "Noel, see how God has blessed me today." Amazing man.
He could take a penny and turn it into $100. I mean, he was that guy. He was just that guy.
I was privileged to sponsor Herman as the first African-American member of the Capital City Club. He said, "Well, you know, I don't need to be a member of the Capital City, but I understand we're making history here, and I'll be glad to do it." I picked up the phone one day, a couple months later, and Herman said, "Who is going to pay this blankety-blank initiation fee?"
Herman was a real dealer, so you had to really have your act together in dealing with him. Otherwise, you could lose your shirt.
I saw the Ray Charles movie, race, we call it Country Dumb. He had a way of kind of doing that country dumb thing, but at the end of the day, I tell people you'd walk out of the room and your pants be missing.
About a half a dozen polished Wall Street types came in to talk about this deal that they thought could be done. And they had slide presentations. It was really elaborate and sophisticated, and they were throwing around a lot of language. Herman didn't say anything, but he kept looking over at me, and once in a while he'll knock me on the hand to get my attention and so on. And when we were finished, he said, "So let me see if I get this right. What you really mean is, you want me to use my political influence to get such and such, and you're looking for me to invest my money to do such and such. What do I get out of it?" And the guys sort of looked at each other, and HJ cut right down to it. He said, "I can't use my relationship just to make some money for you. And based on what I'm looking at here, there's no economics in it for me, and I'm not sure this really works." He was very nice. He shook everybody's hand. He laughed. He patted them on the back and said, "All right, let me think about it, and I'll call you back." And that happened many times. Underestimate Herman at your own peril. They assumed something just from what they perceived him to be, And H.J. was as sharp as anybody.
I don't let anything get in my way. I believe in myself. I know God was at his best when he gave me life. And if anybody get in my way, they have a problem.
I don't care where you went to school. You can go to whatever university you think is great and wonderful and special. You couldn't learn what H.J. had in those classrooms.
He could see in a business what it would look like down the road. And I mean, that's magical. And as Michael would say, his dad could see around corners. Not many of us can see around corners.
In the early 80s, Herman was systematically buying up parcels that may have become vacant. And he would acquire and acquire and acquire, and he did that over many, many years. So it's not just a boom, here it is. He actually always had a long view.
Who knew all this was happening in this market off of Northside Drive now, with the $1 billion stadium up the street, and when it was just shotgun houses and all this kind of stuff. There's a ton of property in this area that it's got his thumbprint on it.
He would always say this is going to be part of downtown, and look where we are.
How did he know? I don't know how he knew.
He had a gift. I mean, it was a gift. There's no other way to say it.
He could see and visualize opportunities where others couldn't. And he would just dare to step into the space, which I love. I absolutely love. He knew how to merge business, politics, family, community. He knew how to pull all of that together. And in the end, what you see is the result of the H.J. Russell Company and its conglomerate of everything that it's doing.
I think the most fascinating thing that you can do in life to build a building and realize that building will be there for the next 100 to 200 years.
The ultimate tribute to Herman Russell is that his two boys and his daughter are carrying the baton that he passed off to them when he died. They are running the business.
Herman's brick and mortar legacy is there to be seen. I mean, that's out there and that'll always be there. And this new venture that his family is undertaking to create this incubator for entrepreneurship is Herman Russell all over again. And that'll be very successful too.
It presents some property today that we did not have back in the days that I was coming up in Summerhill. The need of the people is much greater today than it was when I was coming up as a kid. So we all got to get busy. We all got to get involved. So important.
RCIE's Russell Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurship. It's a nonprofit that we started as a family.
504 Fair Street, it's old H.J. Russell headquarters located in Castleberry Hill, right along Northside Drive and Fair Street.
We want to turn that building into somewhere where entrepreneurs of the future can come in and
be trained on how business works and how to make their dreams a reality. It's hard when you've never seen it happen to believe that it's possible. My granddad showed me all that's possible, from a little boy that grew up in Summer Hill with a speech impediment to see things in life that most people never see.
We want to connect with individuals, connect the bridge of accessibility and exposure to these neighborhoods that are underserved.
As talented and as dedicated and as hardworking that he was, there were still some people along the way that had to help him to get to where he was. He wanted to pass that on.
Herman never stopped growing. He was learning new things and teaching new things until his last days.
Herman says in his book, if a door is not open, you can go around to the back door. And if that door is not open, there's always a window. And if the windows were closed, well, there was a chimney.
Over the course of his life, he saw the Civil Rights Act passed, he saw the Voting Rights Act passed, he saw fair housing passed, he saw minority and female business programs adopted locally and nationally. He saw a real open door, and Herman was someone who understood the value of walking through an open door, even if it was just cracked. Atlanta grew with Herman, and Herman grew with Atlanta.
You really got to ask yourself, what I want to do in life. You need to equip yourself for that. You need to work hard at it. Get a good education. Work hard. Burn the midnight hour. Be honest to yourself and others. Also, keep in mind that you have an obligation to give back to society. That is very important. And you got to love what you do. You got to love it. That's the best high that you can get when it comes from a heart, mind, and soul. And if you do those things, I have no doubt about it that you're going to reach your goal.